In the third and final part of this series of videos, I will talk about the legal case that we brought against the NHS and the lessons which need to be learned from this tragic episode. Vivian was discharged from hospital in mid-August 2011, and I then made an official request for a copy of our GP and hospital case notes for the previous 2 years. After studying them, I made an official complaint to the NHS. The main thrust of my complaint was that the consultant rheumatologist should have considered atrial in his differential diagnoses and should have ordered an echocardiogram. I received a response a few weeks later from the Director of Nursing, who'd investigated my claims. Her reply was pleasant and obviously designed to spread oil on troubled waters. She informed me that my complaint had been upheld. Both Dr. Brown and Dr. Green, the dermatologist and rheumatologist involved, said how sorry they were that the stroke had occurred and sent their best wishes. Dr. Green, the rheumatologist, admitted that it was inarguable that the stroke could have been prevented if an echocardiogram had been carried out. He also said he did not consider the possible diagnosis of atrial myxoma, and one excuse offered was that Vivian's skin lesions had already resolved on every occasion she'd been seen at the dermatology and rheumatology outpatient clinics, and that this hampered their ability to come to a diagnosis. However, a solution to this problem would have been to ask Vivian to return to the hospital the next time her lesions flared up. This would have allowed an urgent biopsy to have been carried out. Dr. Green then said he had phoned a consultant colleague who worked in a teaching hospital and had previously treated a patient who had vasculitis caused by an atrial myxoma. Dr. Green had asked him if he felt that he should have ordered an echocardiogram in Vivian's case, and this other consultant replied that he would only order an echocardiogram if the vasculitis was severe enough to warrant hospital admission, or if heart murmurs were present. When Dr. Green carried out a full examination of Vivian in late 2010, he did not hear any heart murmurs. Now, these are rather strange criteria for deciding whether an echocardiogram should be carried out. First of all, in 37% of myxoma cases, no heart murmurs can be heard. Also, murmurs may be present, but not heard by the attending physician. Also, the comment about echocardiograms only being carried out on patients who require hospital admission is also strange. Vivian only had mild vasculitis and didn't need hospital admission prior to her stroke, but did have a myxoma. I showed the letter I received to a consultant physician, and he laughed at this claim, saying that a teaching hospital would definitely carry out an echocardiogram in such a case. The only positive thing about the letter really was that Dr. Green said that in future every single person presenting with vasculitis or suspected vasculitis would be referred for echocardiography. I subsequently contacted one of the world's leading experts in vasculitis and asked him what his criteria would be for ordering an echo in cases of vasculitis. He said that they were fever, murmurs, or if the vasculitis was unexplained. Now, Vivian didn't have fever or murmurs, but her vasculitis was definitely unexplained. I wasn't happy with the NHS response to my complaint, so I initiated legal action against the NHS, which alleged that Dr. Green had been negligent in failing to order an echocardiogram. This took some time because I had to find solicitors who were willing to take on the case on a no-win, no-fee basis, or a conditional fee basis as it is also known. Eventually I found a legal firm in Edinburgh who were willing to take on the case. The only caveat was that we would have to pay about £1,500 up front for an independent medical report from another consultant rheumatologist who could confirm that there had been a breach of duty of care. Our solicitors contacted a number of consultant rheumatologists in Scotland who did medical legal reports, but they all declined because they knew Dr. Green. So eventually we had to use a consultant rheumatologist who worked in a private hospital in the south of England. His report was finally published in 2012. The report was music to my ears because Dr. Gray, as I shall call him, was very critical of Dr. Green's investigation, stating that he felt he should have investigated the heart and should have ordered an echocardiogram. He even said that the failure to order an echocardiogram represented care that was below the standard of the majority of consultant rheumatologists in the UK, and therefore represented a potential breach of duty of care. In plain language, he believed Dr. Green was negligent. I was overjoyed, and an after the event insurance policy was set up to cover our costs. I met our junior counsel and he said that we had a reasonable chance of success. He also said he had personally won negligence cases that were far weaker than this one. Then, in early 2015, things started to go wrong. Up to now, the NHS had not responded to our legal moves and had refused to pay up. Then early in the new year, I received a copy of an independent medical legal report on the case, which had been prepared for the NHS by someone who I will refer to as Dr. John Smith. The report came with an offer to settle the case for a payment of £50,000 plus legal expenses, but without an admission of liability. I had previously met John Smith when I was a medical student. I was the editor of Surgo, Glasgow University Medical Journal, and one day John turned up at a Surgo committee meeting as he was interested in joining the committee and writing articles. However, when I asked him what he thought of the latest issue, he launched into a withering attack on me. "I didn't think much of it," he said. "There was only one decent joke in the whole issue, and all the articles were of a very poor standard." And he didn't like the motoring page, which I had started, and so on, and so on. John had a big ego problem. He didn't like me at all. He was a keen writer himself, but he was very jealous of my success as a writer and cartoonist. As Gore Vidal once said, "Every time a friend succeeds, something in me dies." And every time I encountered John over the next few years, he was always the same. He had this ego-driven attitude. He was also a die-hard supporter of the NHS and regarded people who wanted to sue doctors as being worse than serial killers. So from our point of view, he was the very worst person the NHS could have got. He was also a personal friend of Dr. Green. There are only about 60 consultant rheumatologists in the whole of Scotland. There is a Scottish Rheumatology Society, and they hold conferences and dinners, so they all know one another. Doctors in general are very reluctant to criticise other doctors and tend to stick up for one another. The medical profession, in fact, tends to close ranks when faced with a complaint. So the content of Dr. Smith's very long report was exactly what I would expect from him. You certainly didn't get the impression that it was written by a man who was keen to get to the truth. Instead, it appeared to be written by a man who had this thought uppermost in his mind: how can I get this guy off the hook? Every action of all the doctors concerned was given a positive spin. For example, the dermatologist's decision to not do a biopsy was described by Dr. Smith as an understandable oversight. He was mildly critical of the GP's decision to use steroids, but said it was a common move in general practice. The most controversial part of the paper was the section where Dr. Smith disputed Dr. Gray's claim that the failure to order an echocardiogram represented a breach of duty of care. Dr. Smith said that if 60% of doctors would have thought of the correct diagnoses, then that did not mean that 40% were negligent. If that were so, he said, the country would soon run out of doctors. Now, I would like to comment on this. First of all, Dr. Gray, our medical expert, did not actually say that the majority of rheumatologists would think of the correct diagnoses. He said the majority of rheumatologists would order an echocardiogram in such a case. Secondly, how did Dr. Smith know that 60% of doctors would think of the correct diagnoses and 40% would not? I think the answer is that he did not. He's just invented a figure to illustrate his argument. Third, even if 40% of doctors were accused of negligence, it would not result in 40% of doctors being removed from the workforce. Having a negligence case brought against a doctor does not automatically result in their removal from the medical register. Most medical negligence cases fail. One medical defence union boasts on its website that in 87% of negligence cases, no payment is made. And the other 13% of cases would include cases in which an out-of-court settlement is made without an admission of liability. Nonetheless, Dr. Smith conceded that Dr. Green's management of the case was disappointing but not negligent, and that his main mistake was going down the path of previous diagnoses. He also said that the main lesson to be learned from this case was the danger of presuming that other doctors' assumptions were correct. The report was a severe blow, and at a meeting with our QC in late January 2015, I was told that the chances of us winning the case were no better than 50%. In order to win the case, we would have to prove there was a national standard for the investigation of vasculitis and that Dr. Green had fallen below this standard. If we went ahead with the court case and lost, we would have to pay all the legal costs for both sides, including the court costs, as our insurance company would not pay up if the QC had recommended accepting the out-of-court settlement, as he did do. So in March 2015, we reluctantly accepted the NHS offer. Vivian never got justice. She was failed by the NHS, and then she was failed by the legal system. As George Chapman said in 1654, the law is an ass. Finally, what lessons need to be learned and what recommendations would I make? To keep this video down to a reasonable length, I will summarise the most important points, which take up a whole lengthy chapter of my book. First, anyone who presents with vasculitis should have an extensive investigation, which includes an echocardiogram. There should be a change to a no-fault compensation system for medical accidents. The NHS should draw up a written national protocol for the investigation of vasculitis. Stethoscopes should be supplemented with small handheld ultrasound devices. This would make a missed diagnosis of atrial myxoma a thing of the past. Details of medical errors should be promulgated to all NHS regions to stop the same mistake happening elsewhere. So every NHS health trust or health board should have been informed of what happened in Vivian's case to make sure it never happens to anyone else. What I have said in these 3 videos is a very brief summary of everything that happened. A great more detail can be found in my book, A Life by Misadventure, which can be found on Amazon, including a Kindle version which retails for about £2.80. Thanks for watching, and I will speak to you all soon about other topics. Bye for now.